Let me take a selfie.
I find the layman's understanding of World War II can be roughly summarized as the following. Nazis, Churchill, the French surrendering because apparently it was a day ending in Y, America giving Japan a 20 megaton receipt for a little thing called Pearl Harbor, but anything beyond that, it gets hazier than Oprah's camera filter. But this isn't my cue to admonish the education system for turning history class into slavery, Hitler, and nothing the fuck else 101, or muck-deep millennials who perpetually believe themselves the smartest fuck in the room when they're rarely the 15th. Look, I love the YouTube channel The Great War. Highly recommend it for what it's worth. It's one of the few YouTube programs I view fucking habitually. As a lifelong World War I buff, it tickles my taint in new and exciting erogenous zones. With that said, like any historian, they are beholden to inherent biases. Sometimes I feel the war crimes of the Austro-Hungarians and Germans are swept under the rug a bit, to be expected from a program that emanates from Germany perhaps, but they do at least portray them accurately, which is more than I can say for their Who Did What in World War I episode devoted to Benito Mussolini. Now, for the most part, it is unquestionably accurate. And then they get to the bit about the political philosophy that turned Benito into Il Duce, namely its gestation in the well-trod soil of socialism, that they begin to apply a fine coat of whitewash.
He became a labor agitator and was arrested in 1903. He was described in this period as a revolutionary socialist with deep anarchic roots and a highly developed affinity for revolutionary labor unionism. He began taking positions that were anything but socialist.
And so the popular myth of Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, right-wing dictators, was born. In actuality, the deeper one delves into the dogshit minds of Mussolini, and to a lesser extent Hitler, the more fanatical his assertion that fascism is not only socialist in doctrine, but is in actuality the purest distillation of the precepts he believes socialism was founded on and failed to uphold. Hence the famed Mussolini quote, "Socialism is a fraud, a comedy, a phantom, and a blackmail." But while adolescent edgelords and itinerant school shooters thrill to the melodious ravings of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf, few are aware that Mussolini, the founder of the movement his protege ultimately fashioned into Nazism, had a fascist counterpart penned by Il Duce himself. Two of them, in fact. One at the beginning of his political career at the crest of the fascist Italian zeitgeist, and the other at its nadir as Il Duce dove headlong into paranoid delusion as he subsisted in northern Italy at the wiles of his Nazi allies, a toothless puppet where once had stood the Pied Piper of fascist philosophy. These works are collected in concert as My Rise and Fall, and as a text of political philosophy, I find it infinitely more instructive on the socialist underpinnings of fascism than the madness-tinged mundanity of Mein Kampf. Mussolini, after all, was formerly a journalist, and thus while his philosophy consists of cock shit, the actual prose is infinitely more engaging than its Teutonic twin. But of the two halves, it's the first that I would actually call your attention to. In My Rise, also published as my autobiography, I believe, Mussolini has only recently been ousted from his editorial position at a socialist rag by the name of Avanti. If that sounds familiar, it's only because despite providing the formative framework for fucking fascism, today, Avanti is a leftist propaganda mill of considerable distinction and remains the official mouthpiece of what remains of the Italian Socialist Party. True fucking facts, folks. But as you peruse said text, what'll smack you with the sideburns post-fucking haste is Mussolini's singular obsession with the word socialism. Socialism, this Workers' Party, that motherfucker's editor must have been paying him on a per-socialism basis. In fact, the first time I read this book, it was for a school assignment at age 11. Oblivious breath of fire addict that I was at the time. He repeated the phrase so many fucking times, I literally had to grab a dictionary and look it the fuck up myself. What becomes immediately apparent in poring over the aforementioned text is that Mussolini may have made hyperbolic statements like socialism is dead in his editorials and even his biography, but it's not because he was declaring fascism to stand in opposition to it. It's because he considered it the only true form of the fucking thing. Remember now, the Italian Socialist Party gained so much support in the lead up to World War I, that as a purely placative gesture, the Italian government gave them a seat in fucking parliament, something Mussolini excoriated as a betrayal of socialist principles, the operative logic being that you can't create socialism within a capitalist system. You have to first annihilate said system to build anew from its fucking ashes. So hear this now and hear it well. Fascism and Nazism are not anti-socialist, and they're certainly not right fucking wing. They're Super Saiyan socialism. Deal the fuck with it. But socialism, for all my issues with it as a balm for all the ails of all mankind, is not by nature associated with violence. So why the seeming perversion? Well, to understand the philosophy and idiom of Benito Mussolini, the politician, it must be readily understood that from the very earliest of ages, his childhood environment consisted of a deluge of political arguments cohabitating with frequent outbursts of violence. His father, an ardent socialist, was on a law enforcement watch list for frequent threats against his political opponents and their property. More than mere hearsay, he was ultimately placed under house arrest for such. His mother was a self-described socialist as well, and given their bellicose disposition and politically charged dinnertime discourse, the synthesis of socialist dogma and beating the dog shit out of anyone who deigned to disagree, even in his infancy, provided the formative bedrock upon which a young Mussolini was raised, reinforcing with aplomb just how profoundly alarming I find it that increasingly today, at every protest from Occupy to Ferguson, extremists of all stripes see fit not only to inculcate their young children in their didactic political pablum, but outright enlist them in protests that with increasing frequency are turning violent. I'm not saying all these bullhorn-waving bulldykes are raising a bouncing baby Benito, but that's no reason to turn the saucer-eyed innocence of early childhood into a fucking Il Duce incubator. Violence in politics is a harrowing enough ordeal to blend among consenting adults. Let the infants stay home and say the N-word on Xbox Live like a normal fucking kid, will ya? Why exposit on the subject at all, you ask? Well, let's see. Sired by socialism, omnipresent arson, increasingly violent attacks on political opponents, intimidation-fueled marches on state capitals, and black fucking shirts! Now where have I seen this before?
The Fasci di Combattimento, the fascist party. Its uniform was the black shirt.
300,000 black shirts, ready for a struggle. With these, the fascists threatened Rome.
Ci sono stati dei combattimenti violentissimi. Quando riuscivamo a capire...
When we managed to catch our attackers, we take them back to the center and give them a beating.
Stand down! Get out! Get back! Get back! I'm not a Nazi!
And then as we were running away from these group of men, other people in front of us started punching us and pelting us, throwing us on the ground and kicking us.
But Razor, Hamburg is nothing like fascist Italy. You're right, the fascists in Italy had the entire Italian political establishment arrayed against them. Unlike Antifa, they didn't have members of the German Green Party hand-waving away the mere act of firebombing the front-flipping fuck out of an entire township by accusing the local police of, and I quote, provoking violence amongst the protesters. Sure, let's pull on that thread, Mahatma. I know as I watch that bloodthirsty throng menace a busload of bystanders unprovoked, the first thought that fires through my fucking forebrain is when, Razor, oh fucking when, will the Antifa twinks cease to be antagonized by all those invisible fucking policemen? Provoking violence. Fucking where? Dunkin' Donutstein? Label me a fucking loon, but the prevailing impression I gather from virtually all of the footage of the sacking of Hamburg is where are the pussy-ass police? So let me get this straight. Outright absence is provocation, enforcing your immigration laws is racism, sitting in a chair is harassment. What are you, Antifa Sarkeesian? I'm Razor Fist. God fucking speed.
The cry of a nation. It's not what we need, the cry of a nation. The global misery.
10,000 protesters took the streets in opposition. Protests were nonviolent, but also violent. I think there were protesters who went there to actually voice their opposition, others maybe to start a couple bonfires.
And there's some of that, but we're talking about tens of thousands of people protesting, theoretically. And so it's just the nature of the media that they're always going to make it seem far worse than it was.
He's a smarter fellow with brains, huh? Like me.